In the fetters, the 10 bindings described in the Polycanon, the Buddhist doctrine, the third fetter is the attachment to rites and rituals. It's an interesting one. I wanted to unpack that a little bit, what that can mean, right? So it sounds like it might mean something about the kind of rites and rituals that were interwoven with religion and spirituality and practice dating back before the time of the Buddha, like in Hinduism and the Indian cultures around spirituality, certainly had a lot of rituals and rites and so forth. And one could almost say it's a refutation of that equals liberation. Perhaps the idea is that that rites and rituals may purify the spirit, the heart, the mind, whatever, but don't necessarily free you of the wheel of karma. And that's what the role of awakening, specifically anatta, is, right? That's one way of looking at it, of course, but there are a lot of subtleties to it. And I like to also look at the psychological aspects of it. Like, how does that play out for you, right? How does the attachment to rites and rituals play out for you? Now, for you, it's probably not ancient religious or Hindu or Buddhist rites and rituals that we're talking about. It's the rites and rituals of your day-to-day life, right? What you do on a day-to-day basis, the natural inclination of the human to apply a kind of to apply a kind of magical thinking in terms of our actions and our safety. Why do we believe that if we do this, do that, exercise a certain way, eat a certain way, that somehow we're gonna free ourselves of the inevitable aging, decay, dysfunction, and death of the body, right? We have an obsession with things like health. Often, we have an obsession with things like eating certain ways, having certain diets, nutritional supplements. These are the kind of things that come to me as far as like very common day-to-day things that we can often have a lot of attachment to and not realize, a lot of identity with and not realize. It can be uncomfortable actually to see this if you've, without quite realizing it, used some of these things to convince yourself that you're never going to die, or that you're not going to grow old, or that your body could never succumb to illness or dysfunction. These are some very important revelations that occurred to Buddha, right, early on in his practice or his path, realizing that, looking around, that all of us are of the nature to succumb to aging, dysfunction, death, and so forth, illness. So what are the rites and rituals we practice that we believe are going to free us from that, save us from that are going to lead us to some kind of safety? Now, of course, I'm not saying that eating healthy and exercising are bad for you or anything like that, but these are common ways that, again, we sort of dissociate from the simple fact that we are going to age. We are going to succumb to illness and die. Now, what is it? Why is this a fetter, right? How does this play into the sort of fetter model, or feed into the fetter model? Well, I just know this from being on the other side of it, that to release yourself from these bindings, which are all beliefs, they're assumptions, right? The assumption that if I do XYZ, then I'll be free of XYZ, or I'll be free of ABC, whatever it is. When we free ourselves from those illusions, or we see through them as illusions, there's a tremendous degree of freedom that opens up on the other side of it, right? That's the key to this whole thing, is the assumptions or fetters are assumptions we didn't know we had. Fetters are assumptions we move from that we don't realize we're moving from on a day-to-day basis. Now, I mentioned something that's just very conventional, like eating and exercise and diet and so forth. But let's look at spiritual habits, right? Meditation. This is the area that really can get people prickly, right? Meditation, inquiry, whatever, reading texts, reading doctrine, watching videos, all these things, right? These also, just like eating and exercise, they're not in and of themselves bad for you. They're beneficial, probably, certainly, right? And identity grows up around them, right? Identity gets entangled in those behaviors, in those spiritual behaviors. This probably is getting closer to what was meant in the original fetter, is that these spiritual practices we have, these spiritual approaches that we have, in and of themselves, I think, are neutral. But to the degree that there's identity tied into them, that can itself be binding. That's more of the same. That's more of the problem itself that we're trying to really free ourselves of. That's where to look, and maybe just feel into what's being said here, that meditation is not your get out of jail free card, right? Inquiry is not your get out of jail free card. Certainly spiritual understanding about doctrine and so forth is not your get out of jail free card. And all this comes back to safety, right? We believe that we're going to find some degree of safety somehow through all these acts and these, not just physical acts, not just rites and rituals of that you can observe externally, but internal rites and rituals. Like, look at the rites and rituals of the mind. Look at the stereotyped thought patterns and behaviors and beliefs that somehow we just think, oh, if I keep believing this way, thinking this way, focusing my mind this way, then somehow I'll be able to escape from the suffering. Yeah, right. Not seeing that whole belief system is part of the suffering itself, right? The framework. This is the fetters, right? The framework of assumptions operating where you don't see them and how you don't see them in very conventional ways, and also in spiritual ways in your life. Those are what suffering is. They're hand in hand with suffering, right? And to be free of all of that is possible. It's totally possible. But you're going to have to see things that will sometimes surprise you. You're going to have to see things that may be uncomfortable. You're just going to have things revealed to you that you were in your shadow, were in, behind the view, so to speak. This all is the territory of the third fetter, to me, at least. I'd be curious to see what anyone else thinks about this or other interpretations, but this is kind of how I see it, that there's nothing wrong with any rite or ritual. There's nothing wrong with prostrations. There's nothing wrong with chanting. There's nothing wrong with meditation. And all of those, I think, are beneficial. They have benefit. But to the degree that we don't see our unexamined beliefs about them and the mixed agendas behind why we adopted these beliefs, these practices, these habits, and the beliefs around them, that there's still binding there. And the binding will take the form of spirituality, right? This is where like the sort of radical non-duality message can be helpful, pointing to spiritual materialism and showing that it's just another form of non-spiritual materialism, right? Or it can be. So all of this comes back to identity in the end, right? It's not about what you do or don't do. It's not about what you believe or don't believe. Really, it's about the identity that gets entangled in all of it. And when a fetter breaks, when a fetter weakens, softens, breaks, whatever, you feel it. You feel an ease that comes forward. You feel an identity structure or a piece of identity or some aspect of identity dissolve, and you see that it was never there. And you know now, as this happens again and again, you know that the freedom available is through the dissolving of those identity structures. That's it. That's the only way freedom is available. So you have to look everywhere in a way. You have to come back for everything. All the areas that these beliefs can hide in and these identity structures can nestle themselves into and get rooted and hide behind the view of you. Like, you got to look there, and it will be uncomfortable at times, and it will be definitely disorienting at times, right? Because the view is the orientation. To get behind the view, you have to find a way or get leverage on yourself or succumb somehow to disorientation, right? And it will come for you, and it's okay. So that's what I think this one's about, and seeing how entangled ego and identity get in the doing, whether it's spiritual doing or non-spiritual doing, and not really seeing that we believe all that doing is going to somehow save us, right? But the one that wants saved and the way it wants itself to be saved is all part of the illusion in the first place. So you got to untangle that knot. And then the freedom is just here. It's obvious. It's clear. Has nothing to do with the self, because there was never a self for it to have anything to do with in the first place. But as long as you don't see into that stuff, you'll just keep, without realizing it, reifying the self that's trying to do all that stuff to make itself feel better or to get itself to safety and so forth.